Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, my name is Alessia and I make videos related to writing, lifestyle, and true crime. And today we're doing another true crime episode here on my YouTube channel, and this is the case of the Dexter killer. So if you're interested, please keep watching. And yes, I'm feeling very blue today, so I'm channeling all of that calm, creative energy. So this is a really long and complicated case, so I'm going to split it into two separate videos, and you hopefully will be able to watch them back to back because I will be uploading them in the same week. So there will be two uploads this week. So on the Canadian Thanksgiving weekend back in 2008, 38-year-old Johnny Altinger was looking forward to a date that he had set up with a woman named Jen. He had met Jen on the dating app Plenty of Fish, and he had told all of his friends about it, and he was super excited. Jen looked like a beautiful girl. She had an amazing beach body and long brunette hair, and hey, you can't blame the guy for being excited. Now, what was kind of odd about the date meetup was that the woman Jen hadn't messaged Johnny the exact address of where he was going to meet her that night. So instead of giving Johnny an address, Jen gave Johnny these cryptic directions telling him to look for this specific garage, and then that would lead out into an alleyway where she would then be waiting for him to lead him back to their house, and they would continue on their date. The date was made on Plenty of Fish, and Johnny and Jen were basically strangers. They had been texting for the past few weeks, but they hadn't actually met in person. So Johnny just assumed that Jen was practicing a bit of stranger danger and just didn't want to tell Johnny her home address, which is pretty fair. We've all been there, and it's always better to meet in sort of a public place. So that is what Johnny thought, and he just continued on his way for the date that night. Now, Johnny had talked to his good friend Dale about his plans to meet up with Jen, and Dale thought this was a bit strange because Johnny was a bit of a nerd, and he just, thought it was strange that Johnny was going to meet this beautiful brunette in this dark alleyway. But Johnny was a 38-year-old man, and Dale couldn't really tell his friend what to do. Besides, even if Jen was super into Johnny and was as beautiful as she was in her pictures, Dale really wanted his single friend to have a little fun, so he just told Johnny to text him later that night as a checkup, which is a really good practice for online dating. So at 6:30 p.m. on October 10th, Johnny sets out on his date to meet Jen, and he follows the directions and gets to the alleyway, but instead of finding Jen like he had thought, he sees this man who is filming a horror movie, and he thinks this is weird because Jen isn't there, but at first he just thinks that he'd been stood up, and he calls his friend Dale to give him a little bit of an update like he had promised. Now, like Johnny, Dale just assumed that Jen was a no-show and that he'd been stood up. So he told his friend to maybe wait around a few more minutes and then to head out back to his car and just go home. So Johnny and Dale end their phone call, but an hour later, around 7:30 p.m., Dale actually gets a text from Johnny telling him that Jen actually was around but was just running a bit late, and he was going to meet her at her apartment. Dale was a really good friend and immediately got bad vibes from this message from Johnny. He found it really weird that Jen was originally a no-show at 6:30 p.m. and then suddenly wanted to meet up an hour later. It was just a bit weird. So Dale calls Johnny right before bedtime and wants to make sure his friend is okay and is actually with Jen. But Johnny doesn't answer his phone. and Dale just assumes that he is busy with his date and he will talk to him tomorrow. Now, the next day comes and goes, and it is now the Canadian Thanksgiving, and Dale is super worried about his friend all throughout Thanksgiving dinner. And after they finish their meal, Dale's wife, and a bunch of Johnny's friends all go to Johnny's apartment to see if he is there and to check up on him. So the group gets to Johnny's apartment and they knock on the door, but there is no answer. And they take a peek in through a window and see no sign of Johnny or anybody in the apartment. And they think this is a bit weird, so they go down to the parking garage and find that Johnny's car is gone. So clearly he had went out on that date with Jen and hadn't been back. And what was even more concerning was that Johnny's motorbikes, which he loved, were uncovered and were sitting in the parking spot. To the group, it looked like Johnny had never come home from his date with Jen. And this really worried everybody, but Dale in particular, because he was the one who actually spoke to Johnny that day. So the group leave and their bad feelings get even worse. Now, Dale grows even more worried for his friend when he receives a vague email from Johnny the next morning. And I'm going to read the email for you guys because it is very weird. And it reads, "Hey there. I've met an extraordinary woman named Jen who has offered to take me on a nice long tropical vacation. We will be staying in her winter home in Costa Rica. Phone number to follow. I won't be back in town until December 10th, but I will be checking my email periodically. See you around the holidays. Johnny." Now, this email sounds weird to me, and I'm sure it sounded even stranger to Dale, who actually knew Johnny. The email sounds very formal and stiff and just awkward, and Dale knows that his friend has a great sense of humor and would always end his messages with a funny little joke. And even more stranger, Johnny hated the heat, so he would never really go to Costa Rica for a really long vacation. So Dale sends an email back asking just some basic questions, and Johnny never responds back, and this is very weird to Dale. By this point, Dale is so worried that he actually files a missing persons report with the Edmonton Police Department. Now, because of Johnny's email, the Edmonton police don't take this very seriously at all. Because they had some sort of communication with Johnny, the Edmonton police just assumed that Johnny had met a woman and he had spontaneously run off with this woman to Costa Rica and was having sort of a midlife crisis. To the police, Johnny had been in contact with his friends, he was single, and he was a fully grown man. If he wanted to leave the country with a beautiful woman, he could, and they didn't really do much, and this really made Dale upset. The police pretty much told Dale just to wait it out and see if he heard from Johnny again, and that was pretty much it. And a few days later, someone else actually heard from Johnny, and this time it was his boss at his work. So just like Dale, Johnny's boss received a vague email, and in the email, Johnny explained that he was resigning from his job because he was going on a vacation to Costa Rica, and that was that. And his boss was pretty surprised, and he responded back just like Dale, asking Johnny where to send his final paycheck. And oddly, Johnny never responded. In the days following, Johnny updates his Facebook statuses, he updates his MSN profile, and he even deletes his profile on Plenty of Fish. So to everybody, it seemed like Johnny had just abandoned all of his friends and family and just went to start a new life, which, hey, is perfectly legal. So as the days passed, Dale practically begged the Edmonton police to look more deeper into this and to take this seriously as a true missing persons case. The police agreed to take a formal statement from Dave and another friend of Johnny's, but when the scheduled meeting rolled around, the Edmonton police actually stood Dale and his friend up, which is pretty shocking and just really unfortunate. Even if Johnny was in Costa Rica with Jen and was out there living his life, the Edmonton police still have a duty to look into it, and the fact that they blew Dale off is insane. It is just the bare minimum of police work. Honestly, it's not even police work at all. I have no idea what they were thinking, and this really pissed Dale off. Dale decided to go all CSI, and he took matters into his own hands, and he and a bunch of friends went back to Johnny's apartment and decided to break into it themselves. Now, just like Dale suspected, Johnny's apartment had all the clues that he needed to go back to the police and convince them to take this seriously. Dale and his friends broke into Johnny's apartment through an open window, and inside they found dirty dishes, uncooked food on the counter, but more telling, they found Johnny's suitcase, Johnny's clothes, his toiletries, and his passport. So clearly Johnny didn't leave the country. He would need his passport, and it really looked like he hadn't went anywhere. He was clearly set on returning home after his date, and it was really starting to look like he had never come home at all. And his car was still missing. So Dale calls the Edmonton Police Department back and explains what he had found in Johnny's apartment, and the police agree that it is very suspicious. And 1 week after Johnny disappeared, the police open a formal investigation into Johnny's disappearance. So when police start looking for Johnny, they are operating under the assumption that nothing sinister has happened and he is out there somewhere living his life with Jen in Costa Rica. So the police first start by looking for Johnny's car at nearby airports. They call customs in the Edmonton airports and also the airports in Costa Rica and come up with nothing. Police start talking to more of Johnny's friends and family and colleagues, and they realize that no one actually had a real-time conversation with Johnny since October 10th, the date that he was meeting up with Jen. Finally, the police are now on the same page as Dale and are starting to think that something sinister happened to Johnny Altinger. So they ask Dale to give them the address of Jen's house, and Dale tells them that Jen never actually gave Johnny an address and tells the police about the cryptic directions that she had given Johnny. So police follow the directions that Johnny was given on October 10th, and just like Johnny, they find the garage and the alleyway. And they start to ask nearby residents if anyone knew a woman named Jen who lived in the area or rented in the area. And all the residents in the area all said the same thing, that no one knew of a woman named Jen, and the garage was actually rented to a man named Mark Twitchell. Born on July 4th in 1979, Mark Twitchell was a filmmaker and had a passion for films all of his life. And one day he dreamt of moving to Hollywood and making Hollywood blockbusters. Mark had worked on smaller, low-budget films in the past, including a Star Wars film, a comedy, and a horror movie that he was currently filming in the garage that he was renting. So the police track down Mark Twitchell, who actually lives in the nearby area, and ask him a few basic questions. And Mark is very cooperative and answers all of the questions with no problem, and even invites the police to look inside of the garage. So Mark shows up to his rented garage and is about to let the police inside, but before he does that, he stops like right in front of the door and tells the police that someone had changed the lock on his garage, and the new lock that was there wasn't his lock, and He just had no idea who put this lock there. And the police thought this was kind of sketchy, but they just kind of shrugged it off. They really wanted to look inside of this garage. So the police are able to break this new lock and go inside of the garage. So inside of the garage, the police are immediately hit with a terrible smell, like something had been burning. And in the middle of the garage, there was a very long and large stainless steel table. And this table is exactly like the tables that meat butchers use to butcher their meat and sell to their clients. And Mark kind of just explained this all away and said that he was shooting a horror movie, so he had been cleaning up some stuff and had been burning some things, and the stainless steel table was a prop for his movie. So the police have a closer look, and on the table they find a receipt, and the receipt is for a bunch of industrial cleaning supplies. And Mark is very smooth and just tells the police very calmly that he had been using a lot of fake blood for his horror movie, and the blood was made of sugar, so he had to clean it up or else it would attract bugs and animals. So that same day, the police take Mark down to the police station just to get a statement, and Mark goes with them willingly, and at this point it was the middle of the night. And even though it was 3 in the morning, Mark had so much energy. He excitedly talks to the police that were taking his statement, and he tells them all about his movies that he was making, and tells them about his family and his wife and his infant baby girl. To the police, Mark immediately strikes them as just a movie nerd and as someone who just has a lot of energy and likes to talk. And there really is nothing too bad about that, so the police let him go, and at this point he is not a suspect. Police even note that Mark's body language when he was at the station was completely natural. He never fidgeted or stuttered, and he looked totally at ease. And even though Mark didn't seem overly suspicious, police couldn't shake the weird coincidence that Johnny had gone missing right next to a garage where a horror movie was being filmed. And as the police looked more into Mark Twitchell, they found even more coincidences and connections between him and Johnny Altinger. So this is where I'm going to end part 1 of this case. You can click up here to watch part 2, and I will see you guys in that video. Bye!